I'm joined now by the co-author of The Art of the Deal and a noted Trump critic, Tony Schwartz. He is in a very controversial new film, The Apprentice. That's him in that scene, and we're going to get to that. But I want to start with something you know all about. You've been, I think, clear and eloquent from before Donald Trump's first campaign in 2016 about the danger he poses, but also how he thinks and his tics. Does it matter to him that she doubled the Fox ratings? And what do you see in her piercing those bubbles, communicating something you know a lot about?
Well, he measures himself, he measures his own worth numerically and quantitatively. That's why he for 20 years has sold his net worth, or sold him what he claims is his self-worth, to Forbes, or why he's so obsessed with the size of his crowds. All of that is a kind of hopeless attempt on his part to feel worthy in a way that internally he does not. So, yeah, anytime somehow it appears that he is lesser in a situation, he is going to be triggered.
Yeah, and we've seen opponents who might have had evidence or facts on their side get outmaneuvered by Donald Trump. We've spent years at this table looking at investigations, the House subpoena process, and at times it yielded good information, and other times he seemed to outmaneuver it. Harris is closing right now. I mean, we're in 20 days, and she's basically saying he's low energy, exhausted, a coward, can't face her, can't face journalists. It strikes me as clearer messaging than sometimes the deal around other more nuanced, important but nuanced concerns. I want to play him saying, if you duck a debate, you're a coward, and then get your view of what she's doing to him right now. Let's take a look.
And, you know, some of them don't have the courage to do it. I don't want to say who, but there are a couple
we know who they are.
I mean, there are a couple of them that called me and told me, Donald, I'm just too nervous to do it. And I'm saying to myself, here's a guy that's supposed to negotiate, or a person that's supposed to negotiate against China. These guys come out of the womb, they never cry. You know, they're not even crying, and we have guys that are afraid to go into a debate.
What do you think about her saying, not only to him and baiting him, that's one level, but saying to voters, whatever you've heard about Donald Trump in the last many years, we're in the home stretch, and this exhausted guy can't show up to do the job of campaigning?
Well, I think there are very few ways to siphon off votes from either side right now, and I think one of them is he's exhausted. I mean, remember during the Hillary campaign where she, with the World Trade Center, where she kind of collapsed, and he used that. And I think
animal instinct.
Yeah, I mean, he's a feral guy. Like, he's a very animalistic human being. And so I think that I think she is going after the very few things that I think can affect this. So what are they? So number one, there's that he is clearly moving toward dementia. I mean,
You're not a doctor, but that's
exactly.
But you know him.
Forget the diagnosis. What are the symptoms? He can't put sentences together. He loses track of what he's saying. He contradicts himself. And that is combined with the second thing that I think is powerful, which is we've always known that he is a man without conscience. He's shameless, meaning he will say anything to anyone. So what you just saw him say was absolutely, clearly a lie. His fear is really high now. And if you combine the evidence of dementia with a psychopathic personality and his age and exhaustion as one of the consequences, this is one toxic brew that I think some voters will be influenced by.
Right. And that's interesting because, again, it goes to if you're undecided in late October, right, we could have a whole side conversation about why that is. But I don't think you're going to close the deal with those folks by going into, the history of Russia and Crimea or any other assorted important things. I want to turn to the movie. I know you love Lil Baby, who's backing Kamala Harris, by the way, and he says every other night another movie getting made, meaning that his life, his rock star life, is cinematic. Here you are. Who would have known that a smart, maybe low-key, nerdy writer like yourself ends up as a movie character with an actor having to study the Tony of it all? So we're going to get into that. First, I'm going to show a little bit of The Apprentice film. It's hitting theaters. It has Succession star Jeremy Strong playing the felon fixer who taught Donald Trump so much in real life, Roy Cohn.
Roy Cohn, nice to meet you.
The Roy Cohn, you're brutal.
Guilty as charged.
How do you always win?
There's rules. The first rule is attack, attack, attack.
Rule 2, admit nothing, deny everything.
Rule 3, no matter what happens, you claim victory and never admit defeat. You have to be willing to do anything to anyone to win.
The characters are based on real people, but there are plenty of fictionalized additions. That's clear when you walk into the film. But Trump was so upset that he's been blasting the movie. He got up or stayed up till 1 a.m. to post online about that. He had his lawyers send a formal letter trying to somehow stop the movie, which they can't in the United States. Perhaps it reflects the attack playbook, which the movie discusses. Meanwhile, as mentioned, Tony, we have an actor playing Tony in the film in a scene where a writer meets with Trump about the art of the deal.
I'm amazed that you asked me to write this book, Mr. Trump, considering the article I wrote in you wasn't exactly flattering.
You put me on the cover of New York Magazine and you can write. That's the most important thing. Now you just have to be nice to me because I'm paying you.
I'm finding it hard to settle on a grand narrative for the book. Yes, you like making deals.
Oh, I'm going to stop you right there, Tony. I don't like making deals. Do you understand? I love making deals. Deals are my art form.
The art of the deal.
That sounds good. The world is a mess, Tony. You have to fight back. You have to have a tough skin. Attack, attack, attack. You never, ever, ever admit defeat. You always claim victory. Always.
You know, that sounds like the U.S. foreign policy for the past quarter century.
Now, in the New York Times, you have a piece arguing that the film gets the most important things right because beneath the bluster, Trump struck you as, quote, one of the most insecure people you'd ever met and the least self-aware. Trump's essentially the same person today that he was as a child, you write. That's the central warning this Apprentice movie poses, and it comes weeks before the election. Explain.
Well, I think that the real issue with Trump is what I said earlier, which is the absence of conscience combined with the decline cognitively means that anything goes in this. Look, he's got one term if he wins. And, you know, Anne Applebaum, the writer Anne Applebaum, is now making connections to what Hitler said and to all the language of other fascist dictators. That's what he's going to do. The only limitation on what Trump will do if he is a reelected president is what he can get away with.
Yeah, and that's more in a second term, and we can show the evidence on that legally and the bureaucracy and all that.
And what he said. He's, you know, the shamelessness now extends to saying in advance of being reelected, which God knows I hope he won't be, here's what I'm going to do.
Well, let me ask you about that because you spent time with him. We talk about how much hasn't changed, and I think you make that point in the piece. Something that has seemed to get worse is he used to keep the PR wiggle room. So he might have deep down had exactly the negative agenda the whole time. But I remember, I'm old enough to remember in 2016.
Even you were old enough to remember.
When he and his aides would say quite emphatically, what he said about hacking her email, Russia, was a joke. He's joking. No one can take his jokes, his rhetoric. You guys are so serious. They used to play that game. Now, when even Fox anchors try to say to him, you didn't mean dictator. You didn't mean enemy within. You didn't mean shooting people at the border, which as a lawyer looks to me like an unlawful order where the military would have to say no, and then we'll see how he responds to that. And each time, Tony, instead of finding the wiggle room, he says, I did mean it.
He's benefiting from repetition. He has, look, we've had him around making these same comments. They've escalated them, but basically making these same comments for 8 years now, 9 years. Count the first year that he ran. Mm-hmm. And you do, as many dictators have learned, succeed when you simply say something over and over, whether or not it's true. And so he has normalized for dozens, hundreds of politicians the idea that you can say whatever you want and you don't have to worry about whether it's true.
Yeah.
So nobody's even paying attention to that anymore. It's simply expected.
Yeah, I think that's well put. It's an alert. It's an alarm. I'm running out of time, but how do you rate the actor who portrayed the young you?
Well, interestingly, he wrote me an email yesterday to ask how I thought he did. And
Just be honest. Just tell us.
I thought the scene wasn't all that interesting.
Would you have liked it to have more flavor?
Yes, I would like to have written the scene because I'd like it to have been the scene that actually happened. But it wasn't that.
Do you
fun.
feel that your actor portrayal came off too warm to Trump?
Here's a confession. We're going back 30 years now, and I was not yet fully on to Trump. If I had been, I wouldn't have been doing that.
You wouldn't have the book. I appreciate the candor. And the least important question, was that at all your fashion then? Did you dress like that?
No, I dressed worse.
Hey, Tony Schwartz, couple of good answers, little candor. Our thanks.